Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, streaming is really becoming critical for broadcasters. We need to compete with the other full-time streaming companies and make offerings like content on delay or content on demand and ad insertion so that we can make additional revenue. It's all coming up with Jon Stephenson. He's the CEO of SoundStack. Next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. By Nautel, worry-free transmission you can count on with outstanding control, reliability, efficiencies, and Nautel's unmatched 24/7 customer support. Online at nautel.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, so glad to be here. It's a hot summer of 2022. Things are crazy in D.C. and around a lot of other parts of the country, but we're here. We're soldiering on with broadcast engineering. That's probably no crazier than it has been over the decades. Maybe Chris has a different opinion, though. I'm Kirk Harnack in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks a lot to Telos Alliance for giving me a little time every week to do this show and to bring you guests and information and entertainment where we can, and just good engineering advice. All right, enough about me. Chris Tarr is here. Chris, how's the celebration going, young man?
Well, as you can see behind me, I've got plenty of balloons. Got them down on my feet, too. My 15-year-old daughter celebrated her birthday down here in the engineering lab a couple of days. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Suncast. Very nice. Get it in my hair there. So, yes, I figured I'd leave them. Makes a nice little backdrop. I am the director of engineering for Magnum Media. We just added our 25th radio station last week. So our 25th full power one. And then with translators and everything, I think we're at close to 50. So, yeah. And just like you, I appreciate them for allowing me to have a few hours here to sit down and chat with you guys. And killer heat today, up in the 90s again, which is unusual up here. I'm fortunately, my air conditioner's on. I'm down in my cool basement, and I'm enjoying it. There is no way I'm going to go out today and do anything because I don't like to sweat.
It's about as hot where you are as it is here. Last check at the airport at Nashville, 90 degrees. High today, about 93, probably about an hour ago. So, yeah, it's in the 90s. Let's check in with our guest. We'll get a full weather report from Jon Stephenson, CEO of SoundStack. Jon, welcome in. Good to see you.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Chris, for having me on the show. I actually don't know the temperature here in Pittsburgh, though, but I did go outside. It was probably in its 90s, so.
Wow. Well, Jon, have you met Chris Tarr yet? Is this the first time you guys have met?
It's definitely the first time. Yeah, we met a couple minutes ago. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, Chris has taught me a lot about streaming, more about metadata. But Chris knows more than Chris has forgotten more than most people know about streaming. And Jon, you're here to talk about streaming. Let's do a little quick elevator speech about what you're going to be teaching us today, and then we'll hit our first sponsor announcement. So, Jon, if I met you in an elevator and you said, "Here's what I do and here's what I can teach you," what would I hear, Jon?
So we are SoundStack. We're an audio as a service company, and we coin ourselves as being the industry's first. But what we provide is stream hosting and content delivery for podcasts, as well as monetization. And why we say audio as a service is we're not just like another SaaS player in the space, providing streaming and thinking of it as a commodity, but we really like to work with our broadcast partners, with podcast networks, and also other platforms to effectively be an extension of their day-to-day operations and help them create, distribute, and ultimately monetize audio content on the internet.
So, Chris, maybe you feel the same way. Maybe you feel different. It seems to me that live streaming is pretty commonplace these days. Most engineers, most radio stations know how to do this. You set up some kind of streaming encoder device, preferably with some audio processing in front of it. You encode your audio and you send it out to a content distribution network. That's some company that's got a lot of computers and in a data center. Hopefully it's nice and secure. And you advertise the link for this in a player or on your website, or put the player on the website. You stream live, and that's not a big problem. Chris, would you agree that most stations kind of get that part of the technology at this point?
Oh, sure. I mean, very few people are not doing that anymore. And there are so many different CDNs and platforms and everything like that. And it's gotten to the point where it's affordable and easy to set up. So, yeah, I think we're all at least to that point. And there are many stations that are even a little farther along than that.
So I'm going to want Jon to help us understand some of the things beyond that, since most of us are at that point by now. A lot of stations have been streaming for 10, 12, 15 years or so. And the only thing I hear that's maybe still bad or wrong is, sometimes a computer will hang up and the stream will stop, or maybe stations still aren't processing their audio specifically for streaming. And that's kind of a no-no. Sometimes you run across a stream that the levels jump around. So Jon, I hope in the next hour, we're going to get to understand some of the other things, especially some of the things that you can make money at, or some of the things that you can sell for more money to your advertisers, and some of the things that you can maybe make more money automatically for your station. And maybe your president, CEO, general manager of your radio station can look at the engineering department as somebody to help with the revenue side of things and get more money coming in and more listeners coming in, make it easier for listeners to find the content that they want. So many people these days don't really take the time to enjoy content as it's being made, real time. I haven't watched live television, except for maybe a ball game or a NASCAR race or the Super Bowl. In fact, I probably haven't watched live television since a weather forecast during bad weather or the Super Bowl this year. And I get a lot of video, on demand. And I would do more radio on demand if I knew. I guess I'd do some radio on demand. So that's the kind of thing that Jon's going to talk to us about. We're going to tell you real quick about a couple of things going on behind the scenes here at TWiRT. First of all, Radio Guide magazine, the new one just came in with a cover story, IT security at the transmitter and beyond. The website, here it is. Look, radio-guide.com, radio-guide.com. Ray Top is the publisher, and Ray, he's designed this magazine a little bit differently. The articles are big, lots of words, lots of pictures where needed, and you get, as an engineer, you get a much bigger, fresher, fuller look at the topic at hand. Like this article here from Michael Bradford, The Cost of Copper and Security, and an article here from Jim Turvaville. Hey, Jim. The Phoenix Principle. I don't know what that is, but we'll take a look at it. So Radio Guide, radio-guide.com. You can sign up to get your paper copy. New one comes out every 2 months, chock full of information. Hey, our show is actually brought to you also in part by Nautel. And Nautel, they're going to restart their webinars next month. And so on the next Thursday show, right after 4th of July, Thursday, we're going to tell you about what's coming up, what you can sign up for at Nautel. You can probably go there now to nautel.com/webinars, but I want to make sure you know about their new line of transmitters, the new VX series of transmitters from Nautel. These are really slick, and a couple of reasons why. New design, and the amplifier pallets on these things can be traded out, swapped out without soldering. You can just take a screwdriver, go in there and remove the pallets with a screwdriver, and you don't have to do any soldering. And that is a big plus. Hey, if you're on a mountaintop site trying to get your soldering iron in there and remove a pallet or swap a pallet out, that can be a pain. Hey, oh, gee, I forgot the solder. And it's a helicopter ride back down. That can be a problem. So just bring your screwdriver, swap out a pallet if you do have one fail. Also, the power supplies. These are swappable, and on units that have multiple supplies, they're hot swappable. The new VX series from Nautel. Check that out. And check back in with us next week for announcements about the upcoming webinars in July. But you may be able to go to the website right now at nautel.com/webinars and sign up for the July webinars that are coming up. All right. That's out of the way. Now we know about it. Jon Stephenson, let's begin to talk about the things that are just beyond live streaming. I don't know where you want to start, Jon. I've got a whole list of things here. I guess one place to start is the technologies that you have put together. Tell us about SoundStack
And is that just a brand new startup, or have you assembled other stuff? How'd you get this thing going?
Yeah, so I actually started a stream hosting provider back in June of 2009. So literally just celebrated year 13. I started that in high school. Back then, we were just a traditional stream hosting provider, providing streaming and analytics, and mobile players and web players for broadcasters. And over time, we started focusing a lot more on dynamic ad insertion for live streams and podcasts, which enables broadcasters or podcasters to make money off of their actual listenership and everything. And that eventually grew into a company that was called Media Creek, where Media Creek was the holdings company. And we had 5 brands under it. We had Empire Streaming, a brand called Audio Reach, which was our ad marketplace. We had a spin-off brand called Abovecast, which was just another stream hosting provider. And then we also acquired the assets of Live 365 back in 2016 through bankruptcy, and also acquired another ad consultancy firm in 2020, which was called Audio Catapult. So trying to say in that on an elevator pitch, it was definitely very, very difficult to do in a very concise, succinct way. And that's what ultimately led to SoundStack. So we actually rebranded back in April of this year. And yeah, I mean, we're chugging along. It's been a couple of months, but we basically unified all of our offering under SoundStack. And then we left the Live 365 brand as is. And it's kind of like a showcase of what kind of different platforms or what you can ultimately do across the SoundStack ecosystem. So Live 365 is a platform by itself. And that's also part of what we do here at SoundStack, is not only help traditional radio broadcasters that are mid-size and large, or podcast networks, but we also ultimately power other platforms like our Live 365 offering.
Let's talk about Live 365 for just a minute, so we can get it talked about and off the plate, because I think you've got other more broadcast professional offerings. But Live 365, it's easy to say. A lot of folks know the name. It was a popular brand, and then something seemed to happen to it. Tell me what Live 365 is today, and what kind of people use that, so then we can move on to your other technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's still relevant for particular types of radio broadcasters. So Live 365, previously, before we took it over, was very much like a hobby-centric prosumer platform. It really didn't do a lot with like real traditional AM, FM radio stations. We took over the assets and relaunched it back in 2017 as a new platform. And definitely a large part of our consumer base is that prosumer and hobbyist. But what we've started getting into is hosting more smaller to mid-sized radio stations that just want kind of a down-to-earth, I don't want to say necessarily cookie cutter, but like a templatized way to get online and streaming really, really quickly. And the other big differentiator for broadcasters is that we cover the music licensing in the US, UK, and Canada. So if you're a radio broadcaster and you're not licensed, you can ultimately use our platform to distribute your live stream. Still get in front of the same audiences, but do it on kind of a much more smaller scale. Whereas with SoundStack, it's more targeted at those like mid to large size enterprise broadcasters, podcasters, and ultimately other platforms that want to incorporate audio into their strategy.
And I think that's really,
go ahead.
I think that's really important for, especially the Live 365 platform for smaller broadcasters, because that's really, as I go around and do some consulting work for some of these small broadcasters, that's really the biggest question for those who aren't streaming is, how do we get into this? How do we manage things like, the royalties? How do we manage, the streaming platforms? How do we manage, all of these different things? So to have kind of a one-stop shop where they don't really have to do much, they just really have to get the audio to where it needs to go, and have somebody else take care of sound exchange and those sorts of things for them, is I think a compelling offering, again, especially for the smaller broadcasters, because the hardest part, I think, when you're a small broadcaster is to get into the mindset of streaming. A lot of the mid and large size broadcasters understand smart speakers and those sorts of things, and realize that it's a pretty big component of what you do. But a lot of the smaller broadcasters still are kind of like, well, our core business is radio. That's what we know. We don't really know anything about streaming. Yeah, we'd like to do it, but it's, we don't want to take anybody away from our core business to do it. So, I do think something like the Live 365 offering is still very relevant to the industry today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of our biggest goals with it is just to make like a plug and play solution. So, I mean, you can literally sign up online today and be broadcasting and be compliant as a radio broadcaster on our platform. You just need to basically send us an audio feed, make sure metadata is configured. You can bring your own encoder. We support an IC based ICY encoder, which is based on IceCast. So as long as you're able to point that to a destination, you can start plugging away your audio content and metadata and get it ingested into the Live 365 platform and ultimately heard by listeners, whether it's through your own website, through your own mobile apps, or through our Live 365 listening side of our platform as well.
Hey, let's sidebar for just a second. You mentioned ICY, which is based on IceCast. What are the popular streaming formats these days? And maybe a sentence as to why each one has its place.
I'm going to quiz you for a second. Do you know what ICY stands for?
No, what?
Okay. It stands for I Can Yell. It's invented by Nullsoft way back in the day. But yeah, fun little tidbit. There's a Wikipedia article that references it, so it is legit. But yeah, so there's kind of two levels, right? There's the actual protocol for how things are delivered, and then there's the codecs, which are like MP3 and AAC and whatnot. But the two primary ways that we see live audio being distributed for radio stations today is either through IC, like an IceCast server or Shoutcast server, and also HLS, or some providers are starting to use like Dash. But definitely the big market share right now is HLS and IC for actually distributing the audio content, regardless of the format or codecs that are part of it.
Let me ask you a bit more about HLS. That stands for HTTP live streaming. It comes from the folks at Apple. And back, 5-6 years ago, I was going around singing the praises of HLS. My employer, Telos Alliance, had just incorporated HLS technology into our streaming encoders. And there weren't too many ways to play it back then. I think the Safari browser would play it back, but the basic benefit of it to the consumer. Remember back in the day when your website would have, if you have low bandwidth, click this link for our 16 kilobit bandwidth, it sound terrible. And then, or if you have good bandwidth, you're at home, click this link for our 96 kilobit per second bandwidth, stream. And HLS eliminates the consumer having to make that choice. It just delivers you it determines the speed you can handle and delivers you a stream that, is closest to that speed. So is HLS really out there becoming a thing now? Because when I was out there singing the praises early on, people were going, what? Why do I need that?
Yeah, so HLS by itself doesn't necessarily solve that. So it's just a better way to get the audio to the end user. And what's really nice with that versus IC is that it doesn't rely on like a persistent connection. So if there's any kind of router issues in the middle of you and whatever server is actually distributing that audio, it can be a lot more graceful because it's basically continuously downloading effectively a playlist and then assembling audio chunks at the player level. So it definitely helps on the user experience. But what you're talking about is HLS, but it's HLS adaptive bitrate. So you can actually deliver HLS as just a single static bitrate. So if you have like a 320 kilobit per second stream, and you're trying to, download that on an Edge mobile router or whatever, you're probably going to still be struggling. But if you layer on that whole adaptive bitrate, or we abbreviate it as ABR, it's still through HLS. But what's nice is you can sample up or down based, and it would be the client, the actual player, that has to be able to support that. But it can do it. It could recognize, if it's struggling to, get the segments, if there's latency or anything like that. And a really good analogy is if you're watching, say, for example, like a Netflix video, and you see things become pixelated, but you're not actually buffering or losing the content, or hopefully not. That same kind of thing can happen with audio. So you can scale up from like a 32K stream to go to 64 and then 128 and then back down. And you can do all of that at the client level using HLS adaptive bitrate.
Yeah, a lot of times the players will select the lowest bit rate that's offered first on the adaptive bitrate systems, and they'll play that so you can get your audio started or your video started right away, and the quality will be less. Sometimes I'll watch cartoons with my grandkids or my son, and we first started on Netflix, and it's kind of blocky. but within 5 to 10 seconds, all of a sudden it's crystal clear and sharp. And that was it saying, hey, I downloaded 10 seconds of video in 0.07 seconds. I think we can ask for a higher bit rate here. And then the next chunk is the higher bit rate. So I didn't realize that HLS could be done without the adaptive bit rate part if you want to. And you're right, it's connectionless. Would you explain to me one more time or be a little more clear about what so with Shoutcast and Icecast, there's a one-to-one connection with a server, but with HLS, there's not a connection per se.
It's making multiple iterative connections, basically. So yeah, with Icy or like Icecast or Shoutcast, it's relying on a persistent connection. So, if your router has an issue, or if, I'm listening to a server in Chicago and I'm routed through Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and there's a, issue with the transit provider between me and Chicago, I'm going to experience buffering most likely. Whereas with HLS, part of the beauty in it is the user experience and not having to drop listeners. We can basically route around it. So if Chicago has an issue, for example, I might start pulling from New York City. And because it continuously makes requests to the server, it's basically getting small chunks of audio that also contain the metadata in it, and allows for a much better seamless experience to play back the audio stream on that.
The way I like to describe it is like slices. So instead of getting a RTSP, a continuous stream of data, packets from one point to another, and you can watch this if you watch the traffic on your router, it kind of delivers a chunk at a time. So it takes these slices and reassembles them on the back end. So if for some reason, there's not a slice there, just wait a second and it'll come, as opposed to RTSP where you drop packets and they're gone. You can't reassemble those. You're downloading in chunks. So once that chunk is there, it's there and you have it.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, HLS is definitely one of the things that the larger broadcasters are using. And we're working on incorporating it also into the Live 365 product offering for our smaller AM FM broadcasters. But the reason why most of the larger broadcasters are the ones that are pushing this is because it's very heavily dependent on the client and the support for it. So, Icecast and MP3 codec were invented in the 90s. So literally any kind of device that you can play an internet radio stream is going to support that. Whereas with HLS and then even other like codecs that are part of the audio stream, it really relies on having, your own dedicated mobile app that you control, effectively end to end, having web players that you control end to end. And, it has a lot of uplift to be able to do that. And I think HLS is definitely taking a big market share now, but a lot of it's being pushed by these mid-size and larger broadcasters, having control over where their listeners are actually consuming their content.
We are talking to Jon Stephenson. He is the CEO of SoundStack. Chris Tarr is along, and this is episode number 600. You ever think we'd make it this far? 600 this week in Radio Tech. I get a call from our producer, Suncast, every week. And he says, are you doing a show this week? I don't know. You better, because you're approaching 600. If it wasn't for Suncast, we wouldn't be this far in his encouragement. That's almost true. Hey, our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Angry Audio. Don't get mad, get angry. And I'm using one of these right now on my earbud feed in case I forget to take it out. I will rip this apart instead of ripping my ear out. And that is this headphone disconnector. This is from great idea from Angry Audio, the Headphone Disconnector. It comes in the 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve size for you professional headphone wearers. And it also comes in the 3.5 millimeter for, jacklegs like me. So here we go. It's down there. If I walk away, it'll disconnect right there or pull my ear off. That's the idea that it won't. This is available for Angry Audio. The website is angryaudio.com, where they have lots of Studio Hub devices right here. Oh, there's the headphone disconnector. And they got a new product with the headphone disconnector line at Angry Audio. And that is it's the Disconnector Gizmo. And this is it's like a headphone jack, but it's got the magnetic keeper right there, the magnetic disconnector. It's pretty cool too. So check that out from Angry Audio. Plus a full array of headphone amps like this one, the Headphone Gizmo from Angry Audio. This one's terrific because you won't snag your pantyhose on this one. It's nice and smooth right here. It'll just screw right to the bottom of your console desk, or it'll lay on top like this. It's got little rubber feet on it, and it's the Studio Hub standard for feeding audio and power if you want to. One 16-volt power supply will power 3 of these in series, so that's pretty cool. Each one has their own independent volume control and 1/4 inch and also a 3.5 millimeter size headphone jacks right there. Check it out. angryaudio.com. Call your favorite dealer, but don't let your dealer talk you into something else. No, no, no. Get the real stuff. Studio Hub Plus adapters, and Angry Audio Gizmos like this one. Our show is also brought to you in part by Max Connect Wireless. When you need reliable, data-preferred, data-prioritized service out wherever you are, transmitter site, doing a live remote broadcast in a stadium full of people, here's Gary Morrill to tell you more about it.
I'm Gary Morrill, Midwest Regional Director of Engineering for Alpha Media. When I first spoke with Josh Bone about Max Connect, he told me they'd work great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using Max Connect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. We also have times where we need to be able to get out to a venue where it's kind of challenging because everybody and his brother is trying to stream video at the same time, like at a big sporting event. And you know what? Our data gets through every time because it's prioritized packet data. It works for us. It'll work for you. Max Connect. Check it out.
Got the same one right here. Well, no, it's a different one. This one's a Cradle Point. It doesn't really matter which one it is. I have a Pep Wave. I have that loaned to a friend of mine right now. And this will give you prioritized data at your venue. Also a static IP address. So that's pretty cool too. Thanks a lot, Josh Bone, for thinking of this great idea and actually implementing it and making it work. That's the mark of a real entrepreneur, is getting it to actually work and making it available for us to buy. Like, let me give you my money. MaxConnect.com. We'll have a link in the show notes. All right. We are here with Chris Tarr, my co-host, and Jon Stephenson, CEO of SoundStack. We've been talking about some streaming technologies, traditional streaming, but there's other technologies too that Jon is very involved with. Dynamic ad insertion, Jon, has always been a bit of a perplexing thing for me. I know that a lot of us have experienced dynamic ad insertion where the ad volume was significantly different than the stream volume. And I'm just wondering, has there been some progress? Maybe you guys have figured out some ways to help make this happen better. I can get it. If it's a pre-roll, that's okay. But if it's supposed to be spliced into the stream to replace some other ads, sure would like it to be the same volume. What do you got going to fix that problem?
Yeah, I mean, definitely on the volume normalization, that is absolutely fixed. I mean, it's not foolproof all the time, especially if you change your volume in the middle of the day or something like that. But on the SoundStack side and also for our Live 365 offering, we do sample the audio streams to actually try to normalize the volume and match it. And what's kind of involved behind the scenes on that is, if you think about just a traditional ad, like, you're not actually able to just literally shove it into an audio stream. There has to be a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and that's, re-encoding the audio ad, normalizing the volume on it, and then also matching like the streaming format and be able to actually get it precisely into the stream when it's supposed to be heard. So from a volume normalization standpoint, I mean, that's definitely, I would like to say, a thing of the past. Definitely know some of those experiences. Hopefully CTV can kind of catch up with some of the volume normalization issues that I think are still definitely relevant on audio, or for video ads and whatnot. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting too is just the precision of ad insertion. There's definitely a lot that we can do, especially with larger enterprise broadcasters, to help make sure that when you're supposed to be in a break, it's triggered at the correct time, and things are pulled out of the break when they're ultimately supposed to too. So you're not hearing some of the underlying content, or you're not hearing, issues with the transition of it.
If a broadcaster, and maybe Chris hasn't answered this because I haven't experienced it myself. I'm part owner of 14 pretty small radio stations. We don't do dynamic ad insertion. We don't look for revenue that way. Maybe we could. I don't think our reach would typically justify that. Although I got to tell you, if there's a football game going on in American Samoa, we got a lot of people on the west coast of the U.S. and in Hawaii who are tuning in for that high school or college level Samoan football game. But Well, where was I going with that? At what level does a broadcaster start thinking about dynamic ad insertion for revenue? At what point, and how, generally speaking, how does a broadcaster decide, okay, I'm going to have one or maybe two spot sets per hour that I'm going to be playing ads that are from my local area, and they're going to be replaceable for people maybe outside the area, or maybe people who are listening on the stream rather than over the air. How does this work logistically or financially, decision wise, to do this, and what makes sense in ad replacement?
Where we're starting to do that. I think the answer that you were asking, or the question you were asking, is when does it make sense? And I think it makes sense no matter the size. I think it makes sense if it's something you want to dive into. Now, again, you've got that paradigm where you've got these local stations going, well, we're here to sell ad time over the air. We don't want to dilute it with selling ads over our stream and things like that. So I think you have to get to a point where you're comfortable with it, first of all. But even with the roll your own technology now, I can do ad insertion locally and have it match up and have the audio quality match the stream quality and those sorts of things. So it's out there, and it's not difficult to do either yourself or with a provider. But I think the hardest thing to get over at this point is, again, the local radio station saying, that's not what we do. We're not in the business of selling advertising on a stream. We're, in the business of selling advertising on a radio station. We don't want to legitimize that. We don't want to make it sound less important. That is our primary business. So, you see a lot of larger broadcasters get over that kind of hump, and it starts to make sense, and they look at it as additional revenue rather than replacement revenue. But I think, where it is difficult is, you really have to have something locally that you can make money from both ways. Because we're still not at the point yet with smaller stations where that additional streaming revenue is there from national ads or things like that, where you're able to make a lot of money on the ad insertion versus the local advertising. Really, where you see it more is still in the situations where you're playing national ads and you have to overlay them because of the royalty or the performance licensing for the voice actors and things like that. So you still see some of that, but with metadata, every automation system these days does metadata. So, it is so easy to do that now. There's really no reason not to, if you have the ability. So, I think a big part of that is just, again, that whole, there's still not a lot of knowledge in these smaller stations about the benefits of streaming and the benefits of overlays.
Gotcha. Jon, what's your opinion on that? And Chris, thanks for jumping in and answering that from your station perspective. Jon, how do you see it?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with Chris. There's no good of time as today to kind of start working on dynamic ad insertion. I think the thing to go off of that is something that we do, which is kind of interesting with some of our medium and larger broadcasters, is the concept of doing in-market and out-of-market advertising. And if you're selling to like a traditional local buyer, what's really cool with some of the technologies that we have here at SoundStack is somebody that's listening within the market on a audio stream that's through the internet can actually just hear the traditional simulcast as they are today. But if somebody's listening outside of like a designated market area, we can actually overlay that with programmatic ads, where maybe they're a mix of national buys that we're able to get here at SoundStack, or even very individualized that are very heavily targeted to that listener. Is a really a good way for broadcasters to start making additional money, especially if they have, double-digit percentages of their audience that are listening outside of their market. And that's more or less a plug-and-play thing for some of our broadcast partners, where basically you just start sending metadata. We do some configuration on our side. We kind of just start, monetizing and sending you a check at the end of the month. So the sellers in the local markets don't have to worry about selling additional advertisements or diluting their local buys. It's just another way to, effectively check a box and start having additional revenue streams flowing to the broadcast group.
I think I need this explained to me again. This word that I have such trouble with, and that's programmatic.
Yep.
Programmatic ad insertion. John, what does that mean to you guys?
So there's kind of two layers, right? So there's the actual dynamic ad insertion, which is the listener and being able to actually replace an ad on top of it. And then there's connecting it to a programmatic marketplace like the SoundStack marketplace. And programmatic has kind of some light definitions or vague definitions that can be interpreted in different ways. But what it effectively means is that we're able to, in real time, have that single opportunity of an ad that's able to be placed in an audio stream represented programmatically on many different exchanges. So if you think about it, maybe some of you are doing this with display, for example, right now. You're getting buys from people that you're actually not, necessarily talking to. That's all being represented programmatically on different platforms, which are called DSPs, demand side platforms. And what's cool with that is there's many people trying to buy your inventory at the same time. And ultimately what that does is it drives up, CPM values and makes you earn more revenue for that listener opportunity that we might be able to insert an ad.
Also, Kirk, I've described programmatic advertising such as if you're a snowblower dealer and you know that the upper Midwest is up for a bunch of heavy snowstorms, you can go on and try to buy advertising, blanket advertising on all the stations that are in that area for snowblowers. Of course, there may be others doing that too. So it becomes who's going to pay more and where is it going to get placed. And so there's that opportunity for advertising on your station that may not come from a local seller. But, what can happen is it opens up all of these stations as a marketplace for individual ad buys. And then, your station gets a cut of that. One thing I want to touch on when you mentioned geographically, some of the things that some of the broadcasters are doing now and where this may help is geofencing their streams. For example, maybe you don't want to pay sound exchange royalties for somebody listening in California because they don't affect your revenues. So basically, that's money out the door that you're not going to see back. So you may want to say, I really only want to reach people in my geographic area who are going to be listeners of the station, who are going to be visiting these advertisers. Well, with national advertising and programmatic buys, then all of a sudden it becomes a little more worthwhile to open your streaming up nationally because you may get some of that royalty money back in terms of, money from ad buys so that you're not losing money by, having listeners from out of state that may be sampling your radio station. So there are some definite benefits to doing it that way. And as you said, with programmatic advertising, it doesn't use your local resources to make that happen. So there's no training and there's no tying people up and, trying to, undersell your own product. You can just have those insertion points available. And if there's something there to fill it with, get your revenue from that.
Awesome. Good comment, Chris. I appreciate that. You're watching this Week in Radio Tech, episode number 600. Woohoo! Chris has got balloons left over from his big celebration. Well, okay, it was a party too. Yeah, hey, there's a confetti. Thank you, son guest. Our guest is Jon Stephenson today. He'll be back in just a minute to talk about some other topics having to do with different streaming, different technologies that surround streaming these days. We're going to be talking coming up about time-shifted content, how that could be important to you. Going from broadcasting to podcasting automatically, if that could be helpful to you. You want to find out, hey, I like, the morning show on this radio station in the next town over, but I'm out of their signal area until later in the day or whatever. So you want to listen to it, right? Also, hey, there's an evening show going on my radio station in American Samoa. Only problem is for them, the evening show is at 2 a.m. for me here. So that's no good either. Also, I'm going to ask John if he would kind of take us on a verbally descriptive behind the scenes tour. If he were to walk us through some of the technology and software and things that they do. I know some of it's proprietary. You probably can't talk about all of it, but if he were to take us as engineers on a tour through SoundStack, what kind of things would we be looking at? All that's coming up. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store, BGS. Hey, I just talked to Chris from BGS today, and they're the representatives for our friends at Innovonics. And Innovonics has got this two new amazing HD radio modulation monitors. Let's check those out right now.
Hi, this is Gary Lerman. I'm Sales and Marketing Manager from Innovonics. I'm joined here by our President and CEO, Ben Barber, and we're here to tell you about two new products that we're very excited about. They're HD modulation monitors, the model 551 and 552, and Ben's going to take us through some of the features. Ben, what can you tell us about these?
The 551 has the big display, 7-inch touchscreen display. You can look at different parameters instantly by walking up to it and touching it, getting information that you need. It also has the LED displays for FM total modulation, left, right, FM, HD 1, 2, 3, and 4. The other thing that the 551 has is that it has full-time audio outputs on Studio Hub connectors on the back, both analog as well as AES digital. So you've got FM, HD 1 through 4, they're full-time. The 552 doesn't have the display, doesn't have the metering, and doesn't have the full-time audio outputs, but the web interfaces are identical for remote viewing and monitoring.
Great, thanks very much, Ben. These products are going to be available in January 2022. Contact us at innovonicsbroadcast.com for more information. Thanks very much.
And you can get your Innovonics, get your lowest price from Broadcasters General Store. The website is bgs.cc, bgs.cc. They've revamped the website, or you can call them, as always, because they love to answer the phone. They're great people to talk to, friendly, and all that. But you have to talk to them to find out. 352-622-7700. I've had that number written down in my little black book for decades, literally decades, and now it's memorized. 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. Thanks a lot, everyone there, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Kirk Harnack, Chris Tarr, and Jon Stephenson is our guest. Jon, wow, where should we go next? I didn't mean to spring this on you as a surprise, Jon, but hey, if you were to host an SBE meeting, or maybe, Kirk Harnack or Chris Tarr were coming by your place and you wanted to show off your technology, what would we see? A bunch of computer screens, or do you actually have gear there? What would we be looking at there at your place?
So as a company, we're actually a fully distributed workforce, which means we have 55 people total. We're going to be 59 starting tomorrow, July 1st, all across the globe. So if you came, you would actually be visiting my house, which is just more or less a laptop and a desktop. But behind the scenes, what actually powers the infrastructure is not just a single location. It's actually many different POPs, or points of presence, that we traditionally own and operate here in the US. We also have some European and South America points of presences as well for actually distributing and ingesting audio content. Really where it ultimately starts for a live broadcaster, if you're a radio station, is the origin, which is effectively getting the audio content and metadata into our network. And what we do with a lot of larger broadcasters is we typically provision or set up multiple points of presence that they start pushing audio content to. And the reason why we do that is for just obviously redundancy, and just the nature of the internet. There's always going to be issues, and that really helps a lot with uptime. We have physical data center infrastructure where we operate our own network, which is AS40501, which is more or less its own network by itself. So something that's different from other stream hosting providers is that we actually run our own network. We run our own dedicated physical servers that we own and operate, plug into data centers, and we're not relying on like a third party that's providing us cloud services or providing us bare metal dedicated servers from like a rented capacity. And why that's really important is if you're a radio station, you don't really want to have your live audio stream sitting next to somebody that's hosting WordPress websites or game websites or something. So we've really optimized the SoundStack global network for optimizing audio delivery. And we have hundreds of different servers that are behind the scenes. And on top of that, we have more than 150 microservices that work to create and distribute and monetize audio content 24/7.
You just used this word microservices. And Jon, this is a word that I've learned from some of our developers at Telos. I don't know if you mean the same thing or not. Tell me what you mean by microservices.
Yeah, so a microservice is basically the smallest container of like a function that you can kind of distill a particular job for. For example, so the problem with traditional or like older software architecture is that it's very monolithic and very large. So if there's an issue, it's very tough to troubleshoot and resolve that issue. If you want to introduce a new feature, for example, into your platform, it's much more difficult to do just because you have so many different variables and possible ways to have an issue happen very quickly. And with microservices, you basically have it distilled down into a core function or a core responsibility, and you kind of limit the interaction with it. So if there's an issue with the way we're transcoding audio ads to be able to put into a stream or whatever, and we're starting to see capacity limits, we don't have to scale out the whole platform. We can just scale out kind of that one particular microservice and spawn new instances, so we have no more congestion on it. So what's really nice from an architecture standpoint, it allows us to introduce software and new features much faster, and also from a site reliability engineering standpoint, we can maximize uptime and the overall just general quality of service.
When you first answered that question about, tell me what a tour of your workplace would look like. It's all remote. You're all remoting into big server infrastructures that are professionally managed, right? At the various public cloud locations, right?
Yeah, so we're not running on top of like an Amazon Web Services or a Google Cloud. We actually rent physical space inside of data centers, but yeah, we're in some of the most prominent buildings across the world. So like the infamous 60 Hudson in New York, a large part of the internet, especially as it touches Europe, goes and gets routed through that building. In LA, we're in the core site location, which a large part of like Asia Pacific internet goes through. So we're literally sitting on or inside of these buildings where internet traffic is literally just exchanging across networks. And why that's really important also is just overall latency, right? I mean, we're a couple hundred feet from delivering content to another network to ride back to the user and have that user consume it. And we're not an extra layer or an extra hop away from it. So it really helps from an uptime standpoint and also performance standpoint with just overall like latency and whatnot.
Well, where I'm going with those questions is, Chris more than I do, but Chris and I both still, we remote control stuff all the time, remote configure stuff, but we still have places we have to go. We have to physically go and show up and look for, smoke coming out of the wrong components or air, nitrogen bleeding out of a line or something like that. And I'm sure Chris does this almost every day. But I guess your business, Jon, you may or may not actually go visit these locations.
That's definitely an interesting question. So typically with data center deployments, we send one of our own team members to actually physically deploy the servers for larger deployments. But what's really nice with data centers is you can use the concept of it's called remote hands, where you're basically paying somebody. I mean, it's typically like $200 to $300 per hour, but they're on site physically at the location, and this is a service that the data center actually provides. So if you have a hard drive that you need swapped out, or if you need somebody to troubleshoot a specific server, we can basically call up somebody 24/7 and have them looking at something within typically like 30 minutes. And yeah, kind of making some of the analogy with just like traditional like transmitter rooms and whatnot. I mean, one of the biggest things is making sure everything's very thoroughly labeled. So, when you're talking to somebody that's looking at your infrastructure for the first time, they know exactly what they're supposed to do or what, core they're supposed to pull or something like that. So that's fun.
What I got a question about data centers then. Since you're not in the typical Amazon or Google Cloud places, but you're in places where you could physically go if you need to install something, right? Can you install, let's say that your business was unique and you needed to have a piece of equipment there that wasn't a server. Now, it was a rack mount piece of gear, but it wasn't a traditional HP or Dell or something like that server. Are you allowed to install something? If it's your rack area, can you install something in there that isn't a computer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have some customers where they have like audio processing units that are just literally mounted in our rack. And the way that works is with a data center, you're literally paying for space and power, and then also the ability to cross connect to different other like network providers that are within the building. What's also cool too is some of the data centers will allow you to have roof rights. So if you wanted to have some type of satellite or whatever, I have no idea on the cost because we don't put satellites on buildings, at least at this point. You can also do that, and they're going to connect it directly into your rack as well. And one of the big, huge added benefits of a data center is they are super reliable in terms of like uptime. So traditionally, you're running redundant power, you're running, redundant networks, all of that kind of fun stuff. They're very well kept in terms of like climate. So all of that's fully redundant as well. So it really helps to maximize uptime and make sure that, things are some of the unknowns or whatever, we can work around them.
Paying for space, power, and internet. Chris, does that bring any revenue ideas for your home in Mukwonago?
I will tell you this. I can't name names, but there is a tower company that is looking at doing something like this at their tower sites, running fiber and doing rack space at tower sites, because generally in the bigger cities, you're dealing with the same thing: climate control, you've got redundant power, you've got space, and those sorts of things. So I know of one tower company that's kind of looking at that as potentially a business model. So there's certainly some opportunities there. But the other thing to talk about here real quickly is with these data centers, these are the type of data centers that the cloud services use. So when you're talking about the cloud, that is the cloud. So if it makes sense financially for you to handle your own hardware, and as he was saying with remote hands, that's a great way to go. And certainly it gives you complete control over your hardware, which is good and bad, because you also have the expense involved with that. But if you wanted complete control of your hardware, you can create your own cloud that way.
Wow, this gives and renting rack space at tower sites, and if you need to gear that is regularly tested for its lightning, suppression capabilities, it's right there. The lightning is right there. No.
Right, that's not right. Bring your own lightning.
Hopefully it doesn't happen.
Well, no, they provide it for you. It's a free service. Anyway. All right, we need to ask Jon about this broadcasting to podcasting. Jon, what are some of the typical uses there, and how easy is that to set up so that I could take my popular morning show bits and make them available with commercials, at other times on demand?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, podcasting is growing. We've seen a huge jump in, obviously due to COVID, with many people jumping on the podcast bandwagon, and it's definitely really paramount, I think, for broadcasters to start utilizing some of their awesome content that they're just doing day to day, but also make it available as a podcast. And what that's going to do is it will help increase your audience, right? Because you're not just relying on somebody being able to listen to your stick within the market through just a regular radio, or have to rely on somebody that's listening through your stream. But now if you have a particular morning show that you want to increase your overall listenership with, you can make it available as a podcast and very easily made available on the various different like podcasting destinations. And how easy is it? It's as easy as about 30 seconds of your time. You can set up different types of capture rules where it could be based on times. If you have a morning show that starts, say, at like 10 a.m. and ends at 11 a.m., you could do that and capture the full hour and kind of trim off some of the extra content that you don't want. Or what's also even better is you could trigger it based on metadata. So you could say, morning show start and morning show end, make it available as a podcast. And after you set it up once, you can configure auto publishing rules to make it as a podcast. Put it into an RSS feed, and then it's going to automatically be populated on the different destinations that you have configured. So if you want to have it on Spotify, or if you want to have it on Apple Podcasts, it'll ultimately show up there for your listeners. What's also really cool is, obviously, because we're very advertising focused, you can also start opting into our programmatic marketplace for your podcasts. Or if you want to actually sell more locally, you could also sell the podcast ad inventory after you start building up your audience there as part of your local sellers to also increase the revenue there too.
Kirk.
Yes, sir.
So here's another way to do that from a kind of a, I want to say, a provider agnostic way. And I actually set this up a long time ago for one of my stations using, and you can use whatever gear you want, but I'm an Axie guy, so I was using Axie with Livewire. And what I did is I actually used iProfiler, which is the Telos skimmer software. But the great thing about that is it ties right into the Axia Livewire infrastructure. So what I would do at the morning shows is I would have the iMedia or the recorder automatically record the morning show minus everything else, just their microphones, and have it skim that when the microphone was on. And then when they turned it off, it would dead roll several minutes. So when they would go back and open up the audio files, it was already pre-edited. So you had from the time the mic was on till the time when mic was off, including dead space, so you could quickly edit it because you could see where the segments began and ended. And that's what we did for podcasting, is then we could really quickly, even during commercial breaks, almost in real time, edit up that break and throw it up online for the podcast.
Gotcha. So you had clean feeds of the microphones with an appropriate amount of dead roll between segments, so they could be easily identified in a waveform editor. That's cool. And sure. You know what always blew my mind about iProfiler, and others do it too, is that you can open your mic and it'll start recording some number of seconds before you opened the mic. It's like prescient. Right. How does it do it? Yeah, I know it's buffering. I get it, but it's magic.
And there's some platforms too that will take that audio and can speech to text it and take the text out of that and keyword it and everything else. So there's a lot of ways to do that. But if you're a small station and are just trying to get started out with even maybe putting their toes in the water on podcasting, there's ways like that to do that. Just roll your own kind of thing. Now, obviously, it's not as good as what Jon's offering is, and some of these others where it's really slick. And I've seen some of that in action, and it's great. But if you're just trying to get your toe in the water and you're a small station, there's a little tip for you. If maybe you want to get started and see if there's enough demand there to maybe even then take it to the next level.
Jon, we were one of the topics to talk about was time shifted content, and how is that different than what we've been talking about just now, broadcasting to podcasting?
They're one and the same with how we actually refer to it. So it's kind of like shifting your content. So if you're in real time, trying to listen to the audio stream, kind of the analogy that you were giving later, or a little bit earlier, where the morning show is actually at 2 a.m. your own local time. Being able to take that time and actually shift it and make it available on demand through like a broadcaster's website, and that's behind the scenes, it's effectively a podcast, but the way that you're actually displaying it to a user could be, here's our best of morning shows playlist or whatever, and I can listen to that effectively on demand and shifting the time there.
Gotcha. All right. Jon, once again, I have failed to properly prepare you for the end of the show, and I apologize, but you're going to have 2 minutes to prepare. We give a tip of the week at the end of the show, right after the last spot break, which we're about to take. And so maybe you can think of something that you'd like for our listeners to walk away with, to know and understand and think, hey, here's what I learned from Jon Stephenson today. So, and Chris, somehow he seems to come up with something worthwhile most weeks also. So we're going to take a quick break. Our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics, and we're going to hear from them and be right back.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Broadcast Bionics at bionics.co.uk or bionic.radio. Either one of those will get you there. Thanks so much to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. You can use their tools to make amazing content to have our friends over at SoundStack distribute for you and make available online. Hey, it's time for our tips of the week. I believe I've got a little brief one myself, and this comes learned the hard way. If you've got let's say you got an FM transmitter site, and you've got a FM transmission line that's supposed to be filled with dry air or nitrogen, and it just doesn't seem to be holding that dry air or that nitrogen, remember that the leak may not be in the line or the antenna. It may be in the dehydrator itself. If you're using a dehydrator to dry the air out, to ship it up the line and keep things pressurized, you may want to plug the line off and check it later and see if you've lost anything. You may want to see if you can figure out some way to tell if it's actually your dehydrator that's leaking. For one of my radio stations, that was the case. And I never really had time to properly troubleshoot it, but somebody who did was Russell Lafferty. He's going to be a guest on our show at some point. And Russell, smart engineer, good guy. And he figured out, hey, dude, your leak is in the dehydrator. Let's get that thing replaced. And sure enough, that fixed the problem. So that's my tip of the week. Check for leaks in the dehydrator. Chris Tarr, you got a tip of the week for us this week, yes?
Yes. First of all, I got to talk to Catfish about those disconnects. I wonder if they make those for Bluetooth. Anyway, what I do is I have, in all of my markets, I have an Innovonics site streamer, which basically is a radio with a streaming client built in, and I can listen to all of the stations, especially mine in each market, to verify if they're on the air. Now, those are expensive devices, and not everybody can afford those. There is a cheaper way to build something similar, and I'm sure all of you have seen those little dongles, USB dongles, the SDR things that are basically little tuners. There is a Chrome add-on, a Chrome, I don't know what they call them, plug-in or extension that is a tuner that works with those, and you can actually use it as a radio tuner in your browser. So, what I did when I was trying this out just for fun is I had that audio routed to a shoutcast server. I just created a little shoutcast server on that same computer, and I could stream the radio station from there. And use VNC or whatever and log in and change the settings on the tuner to listen to whatever station you want. It cost I think it was $15 for the dongle. All the software is free. So, if you really want to do that on a budget, that's a great way to do that. If you live in an area where you can't actually listen off the air, and that's handy to have if you can't, and sometimes you don't know if a problem is on the air or off the air. So be able to do that with some sort of confidence monitor is great. And again, the Innovonics are perfect for that, but sometimes, they're out of, not in a lot of people's budgets to be able to do that. So this is a great, cheap way to work around that and build something to monitor your radio stations with.
Chris, I'll put that in the show notes. That's a great idea. And I have struggled with some of that SDR software. It'll do so many things, and I just need it to do one thing. So I usually struggle trying to find all the right stuff to make the spectrum look like I want. But I will look for
and that's
an SDR.
That's what's great about that tuner is you don't need that fancy software. It's just a radio. So you don't have to worry about messing with all that fancy software.
Sounds great. Well, let's check in with Jon Stephenson if we didn't scare him away. Jon, have you got a tip for our listeners today?
Yeah, I'll actually give you guys two. One is a little more hands-on in terms of like physical infrastructure, but something that we learned very early on as a company is I know a lot of you run servers and whatnot, but definitely invest in redundant power supplies, because even if it's not hooked up to a redundant power source, power supplies are one of the quickest things to go on a server. And also, if as you're working in a data center, which I'm coincidentally going to do with a couple of my colleagues here in about 10 minutes here in Pittsburgh. If you bump one of the power supply units, which is very, very easy to do as you're getting into like server cabinets, bumping it with redundant power supplies has definitely saved us several times without taking something offline. So that's my physical hands-on tip. And the other one, and this is not supposed to be salesy or anything, but as you're looking for a new streaming provider, or even just wanting to actually venture into streaming, definitely look at the streaming provider's status pages. So as everybody knows with the internet, there's always going to be issues. It's just the nature of the internet. But if a stream hosting provider is not transparent about outages, or it looks like they've had 100% uptime for the past 3 years, it's actually not true. There's no way that could have actually happened, because there's always routing issues or issues with having to perform maintenance and all of that. So definitely do some light due diligence, and that's something that we always tell our customers and prospective customers is to, ultimately look at a provider that's going to help work with you when there are issues, and help communicate and be transparent about when that kind of stuff happens.
So are you suggesting looking at the provider's status page, or is there a website status pages dot something?
Well, that's actually a good point as well. So the stream hosting provider itself, it should have their own version of a status page. But another layer above that is that status page should actually be hosted through a third party. Because if the provider itself is down, they're not going to be able to actually host the status page, and you're just going to get, hey, this timed out or whatever. So, do a little due diligence. It's just a quick little tip. There are different platforms that host status pages externally, and that's, something to ultimately look at when you're looking to vet a provider.
That is a fantastic tip. Also, if you can get a list of other clients that are using that streaming provider, to be able to ask them too what their experience has been. But that is excellent advice, because everybody loves their own baby, and a lot of times you won't get that transparency. Or that kind, or even just an overview of kind of how it is to work with, because again, that's such an important part of your business that you want to make sure you're doing it right.
Yep, absolutely. There's always going to be an issue that pops up. It's inevitable over time, for sure.
Good advice. We'll put that in the show notes. Jon Stephenson, CEO of SoundStack. Website would be what? SoundStack.com.
Yep, it's SoundStack.com. Yep.
And from there, I can find all your other the things you've brought under one roof: Audio Reach, Empire Streaming, Abovecast, Audio Catapult, and Live 365, right?
Yep, that'll all be available through soundstack.com or live365.com.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay. Jon Stephenson, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us, and good luck to you. Good luck with the new pet and the new human as well. It's coming along.
Yeah, it's coming quick. So appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. And Chris, thank you for being here. Appreciate your help today, as always.
Always great to be here.
All right. And Suncast, our producer, another great day at switching the controls. Thanks very much, Suncast, for being here and helping us out. And he also does the publishing of the show, too. So it gets out thanks to Suncast's magic fingers and typing. Also, thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. Check out other offerings on gfqnetwork.com. I'm Kirk Harnack. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.